And we're continuing with the 12th chapter of The Stolen Lake by Joan Aiken. Now they were very close to Bath, approaching it from the southern aspect, over Odd Down, one of the foothills of Mount Damiac. As they came near enough to distinguish individual objects, Dido saw that the walls of the city were lined with silent watchers. News of their approach had evidently gone ahead of them to the city. The great south gate was closed, but when they came within 1,500 yards of the walls, it slowly swung open. "Humph!" muttered Lieutenant Windward, who happened to be riding beside Dido at that point. She and Captain Hughes had been provided with ponies. "I don't much care for the look of Mount Catalonde or Damask, come to that." Great, thick, oily black piles of smoke kept nodding and piling upward from Catalonde's crater, every now and then pierced by a gush of sparks or flame, and a distant bulge had appeared on the shoulder of Damask. "Like a boil about to burst," as the lieutenant pointed out. He went on, "I only hope the superstitious folk in Bath don't connect it with Holystone's return and decide that he's a bad halfpenny and Grandmother Sewell didn't want him, or we'll all be in the basket." Now there was a change of order in the march. Holystone rode out ahead of on his lively black pony. The fitful sunlight, coming through immense clouds of black volcanic smoke, fetched gleams from his diadem and the hilt of Caliburn. He looked very kingly. But Captain Hughes muttered tensely, "All very well, but bless my soul, I wonder if that's wise. It only wants one marksman with a musket or crossbow." Holystone, however, rode on steadily across the stony plain, with his troop quietly following him. When he reached the gate, he looked up without speaking at the black heads of the watchers, crowned like starlings on the walls on either side. One of King Mabon's heralds spurred forward and blew a loud blast on a bocina, then bawled resonantly through a trumpet-shaped wooden mouthpiece, "The High King! Artaeus, Mercurius, Ambrosius, true son of Uther, Ambrosius, Pendragon of Cumbria, Lyonese and High Brazil, returns in peace to his city of Bath Regis." There was a long moment of hushed silence following this announcement. Then the whole city of Bath almost lifted off the ground in deafening response. Bells clanged till the steeples rocked, muskets were discharged, bocinas clamored, horns rooted and tooted, rattles clacked, and over and above and through all the other sounds, human voices were heard shouting joyfully, "Welcome, welcome to our Rex Quandam, welcome, Mercurius, Artaeus, God bless King Arthur." Holystone was evidently much moved. He got off his pony for a moment, knelt to kiss the threshold of the gate, then, quite simply, wiped his eyes on the pony's mane. As he was about to remount, a boy, still blackened from work in the silver mines, came running to offer him a huge key, shaped like a basilisk, which was apparently the key to the city of Bath. Holystone received the key on its cushion, made some remark which set the boy laughing, then handed it back, swung himself into the saddle, and rode up Damask Street. It was as if no one had been sure that he was really coming, as if they could not quite believe their luck until they had the evidence of their own eyes. Slowly along, windows opened, and bunting hastily rolled out of them to hang in brilliant stripes down the front of the white houses. Ropes flew on arrows across the streets, and trails of pennants followed. In 3 minutes, the whole route was transformed to an avenue of dazzling colors. By the time they had turned the corner into Ertain Street, people had fetched out festive costumes, were running from their doors, fastening red and green kerchiefs around their necks, pinning on gaudy aprons, tying steamers to their hats. Dido, looking sideways at the dancing, waving, shouting, screaming, exuberant crowds who fluttered bright handkerchiefs, blew kisses, and tossed flowers, could hardly believe that they were the same surly, scowling citizens she had encountered on her previous visit. But there were very few children. Now, as they turned right again and came into the big cobbled palace yard, Dido saw that as many as possible of the 13 treasures of Britain had been hustled out of the museum, quickly polished up and set on plinths. The basket, drinking horn, halter knife, cauldron, whetstone, garment pan, platter, chessboard, and mantle. The chariot had unfortunately fallen to pieces during its hasty removal, but the drinking horn, pan, and platter shone bravely, and somebody flung the mantle, moth-eaten but gleaming with red and gold embroidery, over the rump of Holystone's pony. He pulled out his sword and held it up in salute. It was greeted by a hushed, breathing murmur. "Caliburn! He has Caliburn!" Somebody had also brought along the 4 ancient creatures from the zoological garden, and there they were, blinking and yawning in wickerwork cages. The ousel of Cligwiri, the stag of Rediver, the stag of Redynvre, Redynvre, the owl of Quincalward, and the eagle of Green Abbey. Holystone laughed when he saw the aged creatures and called teasingly, "Old you may be, my ancient friends, but I am older still. Still, there is work for us to do." Now the crowd quieted down, for in all this joyful excitement, the hubbub, there had been no sign of from Caercisi, the royal palace. In fact, when Holystone turned the head of his pony in that direction, great jets of steam suddenly shot from the ground in a ring all round the palace on its island, as if to protect it from intruders. "Dear me, that's a highly ingenious form of defense," muttered Captain Hughes, who happened to be beside Dido just then. "I must send a memorandum to our War Office about it. A barricade of scalding steam, most effective, expensive, of course. I am not sure that it would be practicable in His Majesty King James's dominions." He added thoughtfully, "I am afraid it gives no very encouraging clue as to Queen Ginevra's intentions." Holystone halted his pony a safe distance from the steam jets, and sat regarding them. The herald came up beside him again, blew another blast on his bocina, and declaimed, "The High King Arthur, Rex Quondam et Futurus, stands here outside his palace of Caercisi. Who bids him welcome?" "That's a tactful way of putting it," commented Captain Hughes. After one revolution of the rotating palace, 3 people emerged from the smaller door at the top of the steps. The Grand Inquisitor, the Vicar General, and old Mrs. Morgan. Now the jets of steam slackened down until they were only about 2 feet high, and 2 more men, Gomez and Fluellen, picked their way forward, edging between the spouts with some care, and advanced until they were within speaking distance of Holystone. "Are you in truth Arteus Mercurius, son of Uther Pendragon?" demanded the Vicar General. "I am," replied Holystone. "What proof do you give in confirmation of your statement?" "The mark of Gwydion on my arm," he bared it, "and the sword of Caliburn in my hand." Under whose reconnaissance do you come?" "King Mabon, ruler of Lyonesse, and Caridog, son of Caridog, guardian of the pass of Nimue." The 2 men consulted together. Mrs. Morgan went back inside the castle, after a very sharp scrutiny of Holystone. "Gone to tell the Queen," Dido guessed. The 2 officials consulted together, and Gomez announced, "It is enough. We accept your reconnaissance, Pendragon, son of Uther. Advance and be greeted by your loving Queen." "So I should hope," tartly commented Captain Hughes. Now there ensued a long pause. Dido expected that the castle would stop spinning, that the great doors would open, but neither of these things happened. "Maybe they've forgotten how to stop it," she thought to herself. "Or more likely the machinery's gone wrong, rusted after all this time." Whether this was the case, or whether the Queen was still doubtful of her caller's legitimacy, the castle continued to revolve. However, after several more turns, and evidently with considerable difficulty owing to her girth and lack of mobility, Queen Ginevra herself presently emerged through the rotating door and stood at the top of the black marble steps. A throne was hastily carried to the spot by several guards. She sat down on it. Then, in a faint, high, weary, but carrying voice, she called, "Arthur, son of Uther, Rex Quondam, come forward and be recognized by me." Holystone walked forward, crossed the bridge, and mounted the steps. Under his beard he was very pale, Dido noticed. She also noticed with some surprise that the queen did not seem to have made any particular alteration to her garments or coiffure. She still wore the flowing white robe like a night-dress, and the plain circlet of diamonds over her lanky hair. Evidently, Lady Attarde had not come up to scratch in the matter of festive robes. For that matter, where was the mistress of the wardrobe? Glancing round as this thought occurred to her for the first time, Dido noticed Silver Taffy not far away, edging through the front of the crowd. He was leading somebody by the arm. A man in the crowd near Dido could be heard to mutter, "The queen looks more like his mum than his wife, don't she?" And a woman snappishly replied, "Well, he's been reborn and she hasn't. Some people have all the luck." The vicar general, in ringing tones, proclaimed, "Welcome, Arthur, Rex, Quondam, to your faithful, devoted, loyal, and long-suffering Queen Ginevra, who has waited for you these 1,300 years, keeping your kingdom safe for you. Great be the reward who remain faithful in adversity." "What adversity did she have to put up with?" Somebody murmured. "She's never gone hungry." Queen Ginevra's high voice was heard to exclaim, "Arthur, is it really you?" in a tone of genuine astonishment, and he answered steadily, "Yes, it's I, Guinevere. Jenny, it was good of you to wait for me so long." And stepping forward, he bent down. The queen looked like a fat white dumpling beside his spare erectness, and kissed her on her broadish brow, above the poached egg eyes, below the greasy white hair. Dido, glancing at Ellen, who was on her left side, noticed that the princess looked likely to faint. She was swaying dizzily in her saddle. Leaning across, Dido grabbed her arm. "Put your head right down on your pony's neck," she hissed. "Why, husband, did you stay away so long?" the queen was asking in a complaining tone. "And why, when you did come back, did you go to Lyonesse first, and then come here at the head of an armed force?" Dido did not catch Arthur's reply. Silver Taffy had come up to Captain Hughes and greeted him with a grin and a wink. Got back then, I see, sir. No problems? Found the young ladies all right and tight? "Certainly," said the captain coolly. "And you, what have you been doing? Where have you got that poor devil Brandywind?" "Oh, he's here, sir, just behind me. Well, the first thing I did," he laughed cheerfully, "was to pay to my auntie Attarde's account. She won't sew anybody's shroud, not ever again. She lies spitted like a partridge among her tuckers and farthingales." "What, you wretch!" began the captain in a tone of horror, but Taffy only laughed and moved forward toward the front of the crowd, pulling Brandywind behind him. The latter appeared wholly confused, as if he did not know where he was or what he was supposed to be doing. Meanwhile, it was plain that the reunion between the queen and her husband was not going very well. Ginevra continued to scold poor Holystone for his slowness in returning to her. He looked miserably depressed. The queen's eyes had turned to their mere blackness, reflecting only the patchy, smoke-flecked blue sky. At this moment, Catalonde gave a loud, angry rumble. "Poor Mr. Holy," Dido thought. "He just can't act loving enough toward her. Who could? And that's what she can't stand. Of course, she can see that he don't like her one bit. Anybody could see that. He can't help himself. Oh, why do I have to feel sorry for people all the time, however nasty they are?" "You are a faithless, untrue, unkind husband," Ginevra suddenly cried shrilly. "How do I know what you have been up to all these years?" King Arthur's return to his wife was going horribly wrong. Mabon called out angrily, "What about you, you miserable woman? I hadn't been going to say anything about it if Gwyndaion was really fond of you. Let bygones be bygones is my motto. But what about my daughter? What about Ellen? You had her abducted twice. You were going to murder her." Ginevra turned her sightless eyes in his direction. "I had to do it," she said complainingly. "It was the will of Sewell. I had to survive for the good of the kingdom." And she repeated, "It was the will of Sewell." "Sewell be blowed!" "Oh, hush, Papa." Now Silver Taffy shrewdly perceiving that the mood of the crowd was changing and turning hostile toward the queen if she was not prepared to welcome Arthur, strode out in front of the people and shouted, "Yes, and what about our girl children that she said were taken by the aurochs? We all know what really happened to them. What about them, you old she-hyena?" He turned to the crowd and shouted, "She had them. She murdered them. Everyone." There was a gasp of horror from the throng. At this point, Ellen, suddenly recognizing Silver Taffy, exclaimed, "Why, but that is the man who took me prisoner for the queen. You hateful monster! Whose side are you on, you double traitor?" Forgetting her previous faintness, she pointed an accusing finger at Taffy. And Happy Paka, as if he had been waiting all day for this signal, launched himself like a javelin toward the pirate. Taffy went gray with terror at the sight of the snow leopard bounding toward him. He spun round, wailing, and fled along Westgate Street. Happy Paka bounded lightly after him, and in a moment the pair were out of sight. There was not the least doubt as to what would happen. Into the silence which followed this grim occurrence came the whining voice of Mr. Brandywind. "And what about her wickedness and witcheries? Turned my fingers to blobs of dough, she did. Look, friends," and he exhibited them. "Can't even spread bread and butter. Compensation there ought to be for all she done. The tongues cut out, the shrunken heads." "Aye, so there ought," shouted the crowd. Queen Ginevra looked bitterly at the sea of faces confronting her. Incomprehension and despair were on her flabby features and in her shining, sightless eyes. "Oh," she cried out piercingly, "how can any of you understand me? I hate you all, but—" To Holystone, "I hate you worst of all," Holystone said hoarsely. "Guinevere, you have been a selfish, wicked woman, an unkind shepherdess preying on your flock. I condemn your actions, and I repudiate you." "Oh, you brute! It was for you! I did it for you!" With a dreadful, raging, moaning cry, a shriek that went through the hearts of her people, she saw like a saw through tissue paper. Queen Ginevra turned from Holystone and pushed her way into the revolving door, which reached the head of the steps just at that moment. Then a portentous thing happened. Whether because Ginevra had purposely released some control or by simple accident, the pace of the revolving door suddenly increased to a wild whirl. It spun madly round with the queen inside it, so that the rotating panels could only be seen as a blur. Ginevra's scream was echoed and drowned by the eerie screech of the spinning door, and then the castle, as it too began to turn more quickly. "Sir, come back, make haste!" Captain Hughes shouted warningly. Holystone glanced behind him, then leapt down the steps and across the bridge, for the steam jets were beginning to grow again. In the space of 40 seconds, they shot up as tall as poplar trees. The crowd wailed and stumbled and stampeded in an effort to get away before anybody was scalded. Holystone, the Vicar General, and the Guard Inquisitor just managed to dodge between the jets, while it was possible to do so before the jets became a wall of steam. "May I perhaps suggest, Your Highness, that we adjourn to the pump room?" suggested the Vicar General, who looked badly shaken. I do not believe it possible that Her Mercy..." "The poor wretched woman can't possibly have survived inside that giddy-go-round," bluntly summed up Captain Hughes. "Nor could anybody inside the castle, for the matter of that. Human frame ain't meant for that kind of usage. Unfortunate, very, but all for the best, maybe." "I am afraid you're right, Captain," smoothly agreed the Grand Inquisitor. "In which case, His Highness King Arterius here is next in," but at that moment, Captain Sextus Lucius Trevelyan came elbowing his way through the crowd with an expression of deep anxiety on his clean-cut Roman features. He bowed hastily to both King Mabon and Mr. Holystone. "Sirs," he began, but his voice as he spoke was drowned by a horrendous rumbling roar from Mount Catalonde. The roar went on for the space of 3 minutes, growing louder and louder. Captain Trevelyan's lips continued to move as he tried in vain to make himself heard. "Utmost urgency. Glaciers on Mount Damiac have begun to slip on account of the increased volcanic action," he was saying when the rumble died at last. "The ice approaching the city of Bath with considerable velocity from the east, and as well on the western side of town. A torrent of molten lava is approaching with even greater speed. I think it my duty to suggest that you advise the citizens to gather up such household chattels as they quickly may, and remove themselves from the city within the space of 1 hour at longest. And you too, your majesty, and your lady, and your highness, if you please. The slopes of Mount Ambridge would seem at present to offer a reasonable secure point of vantage. Leave the town, suggested the quick-thinking Mabon. Right, best tell the people, have it proclaimed, you agree? The Holy Stoner nodded. But dear me, what about Kersisi? What about the Queen? The Vicar General shrugged. Fata, obstant, he said, she is done for, we cannot help her. Captain Hughes was heard to remark, I dare say the same subterranean upheaval that is affecting Damiac and Catalonde had that unexpected effect on her palace. Holystone, who looked white, sick, and dazed, since the dreadful scene with Queen Ginevra, now visibly took command himself. Send the Jefe here, he commanded. We must organize the removal of citizens in an orderly manner by streets, or there will be panic and people will be injured and the gates blocked. Order the street watchmen to sound the alarm, clear the town by all 4 gates, beginning with the citizens who live in the center. Appropriate all carts, carriages, and streetcars, all beasts of burden. Inform the owners that these will be returned and compensation paid. In a moment, he was the center of a whirl of activity. He stood calmly giving orders as messengers raced in all directions. Come, Miss Twite, multiple, windward, gusset, said Captain Hughes. Since we are not natives of this town, we had best get ourselves out from underfoot before the headlong rush begins. The most sensible thing we can do is make for the Rack Railway and go back to the Thrush. We certainly do not want to be cut off here in this godforsaken spot, which is all too probable if the glacier blocks the railway track, or the station is buried in lava. Leave now? Cried Dido in dismay. Without seeing what happens? Without saying goodbye was what she meant. Captain's right, you know, Lieutenant Windward said. No sense in hanging around where we ain't needed. Dido glanced about her and saw Ellen mounting her pony. The princess, like Holystone, looked white, appalled, and hollow-eyed. Papa has ordered me to go back to Lyonesse with Captain Trevelyan, she said. He thinks it best. Will you come with me, Dido? But Dido explained that she had to return to the Thrush. The 2 girls hugged each other rather miserably. Here, have this, Dido said huskily, and thrust the little diamond mirror into Ellen's hand. You will come and see me again sometime? Visit me in Lyonesse? I'll never forget what you did, never. And if you should see Gwydion before you leave, her voice shook a little on the name, tell him he is always welcome at my father's palace. He knows that. Give him my affection. I don't suppose I shall see him, said Dido bluntly, but if I do, I'll tell him. Goodbye, Ellen. Take care of Happy Packer, and you might go and play the piano to poor old Caradog now and again. Ellen nodded, ducked her head, and kicked her pony into a trot. Happy Packer loped after her. Miss Twite, will you please come along, shouted the captain. Windward has ascertained that the train will start from Goodridge's Corridor Station in 10 minutes. We must lose no time. I'm a-coming, Dido said. The small English party bolted for the station. Never mind our luggage at the Sydney, panted Captain Hughes. They can have it in lieu of payment, if they can carry it away in time. The streets were jammed full of carts, push-carts, carriages, wheelbarrows, and every kind of conveyance, all crammed with domestic goods. Dido noticed the 4 ancient creatures, looking rather bewildered, being wheeled off on children's on children's pushchairs. Loaded llamas gazed about them tolerantly, as if wondering why everybody was making such a commotion. When they reached the station, they found the queer little tilted train already 3/4 packed with people who were using this means to escape from the threatened city, but room was kindly made for the gringos. This time there were no seats at all. Dido squatted on the floor, feeling miserably sad, remembering the ride up. Mr. Holystone had slept all the way, but at least he had been there, and Bran had told stories. The train gave a jerk. The engine started to shriek and shudder, but suddenly there was a disturbance on the platform. People were calling, make way, and to the engine driver, don't start, hold your steam. And there was Mr. Holystone. He had 6 men behind him, all clamoring for his attention, all asking him for instructions. But his eyes were searching for the passengers crowded together on the train. Couldn't let you go without bidding you goodbye, sir, he said, hurriedly wringing Captain Hughes's hand. Thank you again for all your kindness. Tell the quartermaster to throw out the flour in the black canister. It will certainly have weevils in it by this time. Thank you for carrying me up all those plaguey mountains, he said with a grip on he said with a grin to multiple windward, and Gusset shaking hands with each in turn. Goodbye, Dido. He gently touched her cheek. Don't forget to curtsy, and remember me when you take tea. Thumb and 3 fingers on the handle. We clean 3 tweed beads a week. Mr. Holy, gulped Dido. I've a message for you. She gave it. Thank you, he said gravely. Listen, will you keep Dora for me as a gift and a remembrance? Dido thought. I'd rather not, she said after a moment. You won't think me rude, Mr. Holy. Dora's a person. She did not to be given as a present. Someone can bring her to you. I know what you mean, he said. You are right. Bran will bring Dora with Ellen's cats. Bran is going to travel down with you. He is? Dido's face lit up. Oh, I am glad, as Bran climbed in. Goodbye, Mr. Holy. Good luck. She hung out, blowing kisses as he turned away. The train started with a shriek. None too soon, said Bran. Look over there. They were in the boxcar, which had no glass in its windows. The visibility was excellent. Dido, following the direction of his pointing finger, was just in time to see Mount Catalonde blow its top clear off. 1,000 feet of mountain vanished in a great heaving spout of flame. The huge rock that had balanced on the tip of the crater for so long bounded upward like a pea and then vanished from view. Blocked the pass of Nimue, likely as not, said Bran. If this railway is cut by the glacier, there will be no way into Upper Cumbria except through the mines. If they ain't blocked too, said Dido. Well, it's not much of a place, with the aurochs and so cold and the air so thin. And memories of Queen Ginevra and her awful end, she thought. Maybe the folk had all better go and live in Lion East. Things are better there. Artaeus is certainly going to have his work cut out for the next few years, Bran observed. He won't have too much time to grieve for Ginevra. Now you don't have a steward, Dido said to Captain Hughes. I'll do the job if you like. I dare say I could manage. I used to help Mr. Holy a lot. I know where things are. Certainly not, Captain Hughes replied disapprovingly. You, a young lady, a passenger, that will be wholly unsuitable. No. I have already arranged for Brandywind there to undertake the job. He wishes to be repatriated. He can work his passage. But what about his hands? It seems they are on the mend. And indeed, Mr. Brandywind was sitting in the middle of a circle of interested auditors, waving his fingers about. Feeling began to come back to them just like that, he was saying. As soon as the Queen rushed through that door. Oh, what respite from pain! What legerdemain when one's fingers can do up one's buttons again. What a spasm of joy through my happy heart gambols when a tremor of feeling returns to my fambles. Captain Hughes in a corner was busy writing up his log. Assistance was rendered to the ruler of New Cumbria to reclaim the stolen Lake Arianrod. The matter has been satisfactorily concluded. The water is now back at its original site, and the Treaty of Alliance between Great Britain and New Cumbria has been re-ratified. Chimney, said Mr. Multiple, hanging out the window. Will you look at that ice? A high white rampart was moving across the stormy plain, rubbing out cactus and sigsy trees as if they were mustard and cress. But the little train dashed past just in time within 100 yards of the approaching glacier, and rattled down the steep descent by the Severn River with its 7 majestic waterfalls. Mr. Multiple had the forethought to provide himself with a bagful of plantains, bananas, and chirimoya, which he kindly shared with Dido. You won't suddenly turn out to be King somebody, Mr. Mully? Dido asked him apprehensively, munching on a plantain, and he assured her that he would not. Didn't I tell you that it would all come right in the end? Bran said, sitting down beside them. Not for poor Queen Ginevra, it didn't. She had her own way for 1,300 years. That is long enough. And what will happen to Ellen? She will marry Artaeus later on, and they will have 3 children, called Leah, Penardum, and Lud Hudibras. Devil "Devil take it, I've left my floater behind," suddenly exclaimed Captain Hughes, looking up from his writing, but added, "Never mind, we'll design an improved one when I am back on board the Thrush." "Would you like me to tell you a story?" asked Bran, noticing Dido's expression was rather sad. "Yes, thanks, mister. I'd like that just a minute, though. I want to see them again before the big wall of ice gets in the way and blocks them off." She wriggled her way back to the window and hung out of it, looking her last at the 13 great volcanoes, saying goodbye to them in her mind. Ambage and Araby, Ertani and Elamai, Arche, Damask, Damiac, Pounce, Pampoil, Garis, Galais, Calabi, and Catalonde. And that is the end of The Stolen Lake. I had a great time reading that to you, which is why I read it so fast. I would love to get into more King Arthur stuff. I have both Mary Stuart and more T.H. White on deck. I paid a pretty penny to buy a copy of The Witch in the Wood because I think I said this years ago when I read you the Sword in the Stone, that at first I didn't feel like continuing to read the T.H. White series, but now my interest is kind of peaked again. But I want to do it by reading the actual novels as they were written, not just read the Once and Future Kings. So I would read The Witch in the Wood, and I would read The Ill-Made Knight. Then I would read Candle in the Wind from Once and Future King and finish with the Book of Merlin. And again, that'll happen sooner rather than later, but I have something else on deck, which is actually a callback to a book we read very recently. But I will see you when we get there, and thank you so much for listening, and I'll see you in the next book.